Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya, and welcome to episode 202, where this week I am going to be reviewing Mortal Kombat 2, and because this is a feature film review, there will be a spoiler section as well as a non-spoiler section. Time codes will be listed in the description if you want to hop around after seeing the movie or just listening before you've seen the movie. And then, because this is episode 202, after the feature review, I'm going to talk about the news items that happened this week, and then we are going to jump into listener mail and question of the week responses. So I guess let's enter the tournament to save Earthrealm. Here is my Mortal Kombat 2 spoiler-free review.
There are 8 billion people on this planet. And Mortal Kombat is upon us.
If we lose one more time, the Earth is gone.
The first place to start with Mortal Kombat 2 is the obvious difference from the first film released in 2021. A major criticism of the original remake was that the tournament wasn't a part of the film, as well as the focus was on a brand new character to the franchise, Cole Young. Mortal Kombat 2 makes a lot of creative choices to help separate it from its original film. That is specifically having the tournament and having an ensemble that focuses on different characters. And that is one of the major issues with the movie as a whole. Of course, you have incredible action and really entertaining characters, but the problem is the transition from what the focus was in the first film into this one leaves very little room to tell an interesting story. The movie's overall runtime is only 116 minutes, which means it's under 2 hours. So you have a lot of characters from the previous film, and then you're introducing just as many. This movie introduces Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, Quan Chi. We get more from Shao Kahn, less from some other characters, and it's really frustrating because you can see some of the decisions on why they changed certain aspects for this sequel, and largely they have been received positively. But what I find incredibly funny about Mortal Kombat 2 is it is very similar in overall problems to another video game movie that we already got this year with Super Mario Galaxy the movie, which is we introduce a bunch of concepts and characters that are going to expand the world, show more instances of what this world can be, and really blow things out. Unfortunately, similar to the Super Mario movie, which is a lot of spectacle, which is what you get in Mortal Kombat, and I know what people are going to say listening to this, Kyle, this is Mortal Kombat. And while I understand why people didn't like Cole Young being the main character of the first film, at least narratively, you gave us a character who is fish out of water to that world. Yes, you could have had that been a character that we know from the games, but there was a choice to create somebody new to connect to lore within the world of Mortal Kombat. And having a descendant of Scorpion be the main character, I thought was really interesting. Louis Tan is an incredible martial artist, and it was fun to see what you would do in creating a new Mortal Kombat character. The iconography of so many of these characters is palpable in expectation. Seeing Scorpion yell, "Get over here," or fatality, flawless victory, so many elements, funnily enough, that were introduced in the original live-action film back in the early 90s. And this movie, unfortunately, because there's such a focus on having the tournament, having the fights, introducing more villains than we've had before, and key characters to the overall lore of Mortal Kombat, the problem is similar to how Mario has never really had a story to tell. And I know fighting game fans are going to say there's decades worth of story in Mortal Kombat. Overall, these fighting games that these movies are drawing inspiration from don't have the incredible narrative that you would expect cinematically in a movie. Clearly, the focus was on something else. I would love to see the script for this movie where so much of it would have to say they fight. and there are choices made to pivot the main character's focus, and because you're doing that with two main leads, it doesn't give them enough time to really flesh out those stories in convincing ways. The exploration of the two main arcs of the film are unfortunately pretty surface level, where if you're going to argue, well, this is a Mortal Kombat movie, there's not a lot of lore, you can't have it both ways. I completely respect fighting game enthusiasts because they've kept up with this franchise for as long as it has existed, and the benefit of that is you actually have the opportunity to introduce so much of that lore into this movie. If you have Johnny Cage, which is similar to the introduction of Cole Young in the previous film, where he is the fish out of water, this is a whole new world to him. He is just an actor, and we see in a ton of the trailers that he's just a guy, where you have people with powers that are baked into their arcana, which was a concept introduced in Mortal Kombat 2021. But on the other side of that, you have the introduction of Katana and her whole history, and you see bits and pieces of that in the trailer. So you have two leads that you have to flesh out, and you have to tell a compelling story on top of all the incredible fight scenes. The problem I have with the incredible fight scenes, in air quotes, is not all of them are treated equally. What's been awesome about the action genre within, I would say, the last 10 to 15 years is the emphasis on delivering truly incredible action scenes that require the investment of the actor, them treated seriously and not just for the sake of we need an action set piece in order to keep people interested. They tell a story, and the way in which they've been choreographed with the stunt team, the director, the second unit, everybody involved understands that there is a higher expectation when it comes to delivering great action. There is an inconsistency in the way that that's done within the Mortal Kombat film. Specifically, the 87 and 11 crew, or 87 North, they've all separated into different companies at this point, but the style that we got from John Wick was very reminiscent of what we had in other films. And then on the flip side of that, you see the commitment to something we get on the small screen with Daredevil through the Netflix run, and then with what we got with Daredevil in the Disney Plus era. Charlie Cox's investment in that character and truly bringing that to life has manifested into one of the most beloved casting in the MCU of all time. The casting of Karl Urban, I would say, was not controversial because Karl Urban is an actor that is beloved for all of the different brands he's been a part of. Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, Bourne, Thor, Dredd, Billy Butcher coming to an end with The Boys, and you get somebody who's portraying the idea of Johnny Cage, not in a way that we're familiar with whatsoever. The whole conceit of that character was a washed up action star. You can think of all those actors from the 80s and the 90s, whether it be Chuck Norris, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, all those guys that were just in those, for lack of a better description, schlocky movies, and then getting his moment to shine again. The way that the movie explores Johnny Cage, I really appreciated because it took consideration of who Karl Urban is as an actor. He is not somebody who's known for being a martial artist, and it explores a different avenue than we've seen from that character before, which I did appreciate. But the movie does try to have it both ways because you still need Johnny Cage to be a competent fighter, as we expect from that character. There are touchstones of each of these characters that we need to see in order for them to feel like they are bringing those beloved characters to life on the big screen. Unfortunately, with introducing another main character, a lot of the leads, I wouldn't say they're not leads, but a lot of the main characters from the previous film get even less time, and what that really prevents the movie from doing is feeling as if it's a fulfilled story outside of just making everybody supporting characters. And writing an ensemble film like this can be really difficult when you don't give enough people stuff to do. They're just sort of there. And you can sort of see the seams of the movie because there are moments where it is abundantly clear that one of what was a main character was shot with potentially reshoots and maybe wasn't even present initially when the film was in production, because you can tell that that person was green screened in and not in the actual set with the other characters. There is a way in which this film could have been truly surprising with its narrative shift on who the main characters are. I think most people would have suspected that Johnny Cage was going to be one of the main characters, given that the post-credit scene of the last film was the recruitment of Johnny Cage, and that's where this film starts. But the twist that the film does do is kind of flagged for you if you are paying enough attention. There is a character who has very minimal screen time, and it doesn't lead to necessarily a surprise. It made me think of, ironically, a film I've reviewed earlier this year with Scream 7, but the original Scream, what made it so surprising and why it was such a genre-defining film was the initial kill was Drew Barrymore. You took a massive star, marketed the movie with them, and then they were completely written out in the beginning. Where if you did that with this movie, and I can get more into why it doesn't work in spoilers, but to truly have a movie that kills off a character that you are not suspecting would have had so much more narrative impact if it doesn't feel like the film is telegraphing who's going to get killed off. This is a Mortal Kombat film. You expect incredible fatalities, and the movie delivers some of those. Some of them have been seen in the trailers, some of them haven't been. The overall ensemble does work really well together. The chemistry's great with our main leads, but outside of one major villain, certain characters that we've grown accustomed to being major focuses, at least in the film part of this franchise. I have only played less than a handful of Mortal Kombat games. I played the 2D ones growing up. It has not been a genre that I followed along with, so I need everyone to consider when listening to my review of the feature film, my minimal exposure to the video games, and the expectation that this works as a film. That has been the main criticism of so many of these attempts within the video game genre, that these are only for the fans. These films, as well as any adaptation, whether that be a book, a comic book, a Broadway play, or a video game, or a remake of something, needs to appeal more so to the general population than it does of the diehard fans. Now, if you balance that out, you manage to make both sides happy. And my vague awareness of what the most iconic elements of the Mortal Kombat franchise definitely were rewarded while watching this movie. This is an absolute joy purely watching the film for the fight scenes. That is what you expect from a Mortal Kombat movie. My pushback on how this film could have improved is a true focus on the story. The more meaningful the story is, and the limit maybe you have to the ensemble, giving more time for each character makes those fight scenes more tense, because you don't know who could get killed off, and you care about the end result. When you really only focus on a couple of characters, we know the likelihood of how those fights are going to end. The ones with the supporting characters that are given less to do, the outcome doesn't really matter because the film doesn't invest its time in all those characters. Now, I understand nobody is going to want a 2-hour and 45-minute Mortal Kombat, but if you limit the amount of characters, have them be in different parts of the world, not necessarily in the main tournament. Now, I am talking out of both sides of my mouth with this criticism because, of course, most of the characters from the first film are going to be brought over. But again, if you started this movie with killing off some of the main characters from the first one, it really sets the stage for anything can happen, and that immediately makes the next action sequence much more tense. Overall, if you are expecting gruesome deaths, cool action sequences, and don't really care about what the story is for the movie, you're going to feel rewarded by it. My biggest criticism of the film only being that is movies are supposed to be about the story. Yes, you can have something that is purely eye candy, but at the end of the day, if you are adapting a beloved franchise, which Mortal Kombat is, it's one of the longest running fighting game franchises of all time, there should be an investment in telling an interesting story. And while certain things were taken from the first film and brought over, and a certain amount was changed, I would say more so than probably they should have, it leaves both of these films feeling inconsistent for different reasons. Now, I would be lying to my beloved listeners if I didn't say that I'm looking forward to the third film that we likely will get. This film had a decent opening weekend, more so, but the last one opened during COVID, so those numbers are completely different and a different expectation for what this was going to do versus the 2021 film. I love a lot of these characters, and more because they cast them really well. Regardless of using A-list stars, they did manage to capture the core of what I remember of those characters, and they really do feel brought to life on the big screen. But there are certain characters I really wish, given the investment in the first film, we spent more time with, even more so because those certain stars have risen in the 5 years since we got the original film. So that will do it for non-spoilers. It's Mortal Kombat 2. You know what to expect. But as you've probably heard with other reviews of mine, I expect a little more. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So let's get into full spoilers, and I can really explain what some of my problems were and what some of my pros were for this sequel.
Hey, how's it going, babe? Listen, I'm warning you. I got a Saturn Award for Best Fight in a feature film, so don't mess with me.
The first place I want to start in spoilers is who the main characters are and what makes that change feel so drastic. In the 2021 film, they introduced a new character, as I said in non-spoilers, of Cole Young. And in this film, the main character could be argued it's Katana, and then the second main character would be Johnny Cage, but for the most part, they pretty much share screen time. It's understandable why you would do that in hiring Karl Urban, and of course, Katana's overall story is so much more woven into what the main plot of the film is, which is the invasion of Overworld, fighting in the Mortal Kombat tournament, and in doing so, that obviously makes Shao Kahn the main antagonist for the film. But what makes this change feel so crazy is the first film introduces Cole Young, is the main character. He has ties to Scorpion, which is what leads to Scorpion returning and having the best fight scene of that film, which is when they are in the MMA gym, which is frozen, fighting Sub-Zero, fighting for the life of his family, and the narrative ties to what Scorpion faced in the beginning of the movie. Not to mention, you had Hiroyuki Sanada as Scorpion, which is an actor whose platforms have only risen since the release of Mortal Kombat 1, of course with the success of Shogun and all of the other projects he's been involved with. I love Hiroyuki Sanada, which is when they cast him in the first film, I was so excited. And unfortunately, because we have so many freaking characters in this movie, Sub-Zero and Scorpion are saved for the very end of the movie, which I understand you're going to introduce a certain amount of characters that have to tie together the whole Shao Kahn and Katana storyline, but Scorpion and Sub-Zero, one could argue it's mostly Scorpion given the iconography of the yellow and black suit and get over here, and everyone knows what that means, that character is reduced to sort of a plot device at the end of the movie. And because that's the case, and we focused on this prophecy from the first film, and I mentioned this in non-spoilers, so now we can really dive into it, which is Cole Young's very first scene shown in this is him in this new temple where they're preparing for their fight, and it's this lovely tower structure where we see all of the characters and Cole Young's scenes, and I don't know if this was due to scheduling conflicts or a creative overhaul, because this film was originally supposed to be coming out in October of last year and then pushed to May of this year, where he's clearly on green screen and the background has been replaced to put him with other characters. A lot of his dialogue in that scene is off screen, and I don't know if they were going to completely write him out, but it's clear that this character that was the lead of the last film is not important in this film, which is what leads to his death being so boring in the overall story where, and I said this with Scream, if we spent the first third of the movie with Cole Young being the main protagonist in recruiting Johnny Cage, which is, again, goes against what the focus was. At the very end of the first Mortal Kombat, it's Cole Young who we see leaving his gym in wherever it was to go get Johnny Cage. Cole Young's not even present for them recruiting Johnny Cage. It's Sonya Blade, who of course I am aware because I've looked into this over the years and all the different Mortal Kombats and the different lore and how the history has unfolded, that Sonya and Johnny have a relationship. They eventually have a child. I know that. So of course she should be there. Raiden has to be there because he's got the magic teleporting lightning. But the fact that Cole Young is so drastically put to the side, his fight with Shao Kahn, and I understand narratively the way that you're outlining this, you need a character to die to show what has happened with Shao Kahn getting the magic amulet, what makes him so dangerous and so powerful. He's got to kill a character we like. Now, the irony I know in just saying that is a lot of people didn't like Cole Young. I like Louis Tan, and I thought it was really ballsy to have a brand new character be our focus. Growing up with the 90s Mortal Kombat, Liu Kang was the guy. I loved Robin Shou, thought he was a great Liu Kang. Another character who's given not as much to do, and I really hope Ludi Lin in the future is given more to do with Liu Kang. But Cole Young fighting Shao Kahn, having this I killed him, I win, and then dying, but that character is on screen for so little that it doesn't feel like an, oh my god, things have changed forever. I cannot believe it. Because it's a character that's been completely pushed to the background, which is really unfortunate. That is not to say I don't think the leads of the movie work. Karl Urban's version of Johnny Cage is wildly entertaining. Karl Urban is an actor who has been through so many different franchises. His debut to so many of us was as, I believe it's I don't even know how to pronounce this. I'm sorry, J.R.R. Tolkien fans. But in the Lord of the Rings films, and then in so many other franchises, of course, I already said this, but in The Boys, getting an actor who is at this point middle-aged to portray that character, it's fun the way that they evaluate what he is capable of, but the audience, in knowing Karl Urban, is aware of the fact that he is not a martial artist, knowing that there is only so much he's going to be capable of doing, and the movie's way initially in getting around that is he admits that most of the fight scenes you've seen him in his younger days were stunt doubles. Now that is a very bold strategy to take with the character of Johnny Cage, who is known to only being a martial artist. And initially, that is the way that the film shows what he's capable of. He has a fight with Katana that he loses because, of course, she is the stepdaughter of Shao Kahn after he killed her dad and took over her realm, which was called something else, Adenia. And that's a good fight scene because it is Karl Urban for the entire time sort of scrambling. And he seems somewhat competent, but not in a way where you think he would win any fights in Mortal Kombat. The inconsistency comes in then with Sonya talking about how he was this karate champion. So it kind of has to do both in order to deliver a competent Johnny Cage who eventually takes down Baraka. And that fight scene's really fun because you get to see Johnny Cage being Johnny Cage. He approaches the Mortal Kombat by the end of the film as an actor. I need to be the Johnny Cage that everybody thinks I am, ultimately even revealing to himself that he is capable of doing those things. So that part's fun. But the way in which it explores it, it's really surface level, shallow stuff. The most interesting stuff is given to Katana, who is of course being raised by her mortal enemy, the guy who killed her father, and she has this sister relationship with Jade and a back and forth of betrayal, ultimately leading to Jade betraying the other people so that way she can save Katana, and Katana switch sides, ultimately winning. And Raiden, who is obviously known to be this very powerful character, gets Professor X'd, where he nearly died and pushed to the side. And my boy, Chin Han, who was a really good Shang Tsung in the first film, is also pushed to the side. Yes, I know he is the wizard or sorcerer who works for Shao Kahn, but that character is beloved because of the 90s films. And in this movie, he is just sort of a servant, as he would be. But it would have been really cool to see a character who was the antagonist of the previous film. Like, the subtitle of Mortal Kombat 2 could just be mains are now subs, because they just sort of are. A character's death that does work in the movie is Liu Kang. While he's not given a ton to do, I would argue Liu Kang is arguably the main character of the Mortal Kombat franchise. There's obviously been a focus on the relationship between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, but Liu Kang and Kung Lao's relationship is one that they explore within the film and gives you the best action sequence of the entire movie. Ludi Lin and Max Huang are incredible. If you ever wanted to see a true interpretation of what the video game delivers in live action in a movie, the fight between a zombie Kung Lao and Liu Kang delivers that in more ways than you'd expect. And it's really the only death narratively within the film that feels like it truly matters. We've seen that relationship in the first film, and his death really has affected how Liu Kang feels about what he means to this larger story. Quite on the nose, Liu Kang says, I realize that I'm not the main character of this story, that I have a different mission to play, which is all set up for probably the inevitable Mortal Kombat 3. But the fight between the two of them being friends and family and having to kill his own stepbrother in a way, in a terribly gruesome way, you would expect something to be quite awful given the fact that he's got a hat full of razor blades. And those two characters and actors who are actually martial artists going toe-to-toe is absolutely incredible, because you really see what you would expect from Mortal Kombat. You see special moves and all the different things you would expect in a fighting game brought to life, and that truly delivers on what you want to see from a Mortal Kombat movie. So it's that kind of stuff that's awesome. Kano and Johnny are hilarious. I would say that Josh Lawson's Kano is definitely the best supporting character of this franchise. He's even funnier in how he's just completely over the top, doing his own thing and doing what's best for him. The way that he doesn't care about how he talks to anybody is only amplified given the fact that he is, and you've seen this in the trailers, and we know what happened in the first film. He died, so he's back from the dead. He's got an entire new lease on life, and because of this, he's like, I don't care. I'm doing what works for me, even more than you would have expected than what I did before. And the way in which his allegiance flip-flops, it's so wildly entertaining. Johnny, of course, is funny, and I think Carl Urban delivers as much gravitas as he can with this character, while still winking and nodding to the audience. There's lines about reboots and has-been actors and all those things, but that stuff really works. I mentioned in non-spoilers, and I've talked about it a little bit here, I hate the fact that Joe Talism and Hiroyuki Sanada are saved for only the third act of the film. My best guess is this has to do with the production schedule, because those two actors are absolutely beloved and are icons in the fight genre of filmmaking. Obviously, I love Warrior and loved what Joe did there, and those two characters are the best parts of the first film. So I'm really hoping, based on the way that they've sort of laid out what the relationship is going to be with those two characters, and how the third film is going to be the exploration of the Nether Realm, bringing back all our protagonists, will lead to much more Scorpion, because Hiroyuki Sanada's performance as that character, being this tragic hero who understands his lot in life now and how he serves our other protagonists, I'm hoping that Shang Tsung becoming the main villain again and likely recruiting probably all the other lieutenants to an illegal Mortal Kombat will be really compelling, because I want a story that's really interesting with incredible action sequences. I don't think that's too much to ask for. It's a movie. I don't just want to see awesome fight scenes, just in the same way that with Michael, I didn't just want to see awesome musical recreations of performances we're familiar with. Mortal Kombat delivers the fun, but for me, I expect more of that with a franchise that's 30 plus years old. That will do it for my full spoiler thoughts on Mortal Kombat 2. Now, let's get to the news and that new soundbite.
Tonight at 11.
Doom! We're sitting on top of the story of the century here.
But that's not all, folks. Here's the real blockbuster. Brace yourselves, you might want to sit down.
And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Jermaine sends an email in for news he wants me to talk about. Jermaine from Chicago. Kyle, can you talk about the new Batman 2 news as it's being teased for a winter setting? I don't know, but coming off of the successful Mario movie, a remaster of Star Fox game is also coming out. It's also rumored Wonder Woman casting and Injustice 3 rumor, and Marvel news that they've brought a significantly smaller Luke Cage back and decided to not to recast Iron Fist. So the first place I'm going to start with this, Jermaine, is, of course, I think everyone saw the camera test for the Batman 2, and there was snow. I don't know if this teases what everybody is hoping for as long as we've known there was going to be a Batman 2, Mr. Freeze, I think, has been on the top of that list for the possibility of who the villain could be. And as much as I would love to see, not gritty, because that just feels like an overused adjective at this point, but what Matt Reeves would bring to the practicality of Mr. Freeze would be really cool. I just am happy that it's a different setting. My gut feeling the whole time, because we know that this is a mystery, likely connected to the history of Gotham, I just feel like we're going to get something connected to the Court of Owls. I know that we have the entire Dent family, but again, they are an established family within the Gotham world, and we know so much about the Waynes and the Arkhams from the first The Batman, so that's really where my mind is leading me. I would love to be completely surprised, and it is in fact Mr. Freeze, but I just don't see how that fits into a mystery, which we already know that this is going to be. Matt Reeves and all of the people involved with this have said it's going to be huge, which I expect it to be, and I love Matt Reeves. The last sequel he made, that was a direct sequel, was War for the Planet of the Apes. And when you look at what he was capable of doing from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which was his first installment in that franchise, and War, those are some of the best sequels within the blockbuster genre we've ever had, and I don't think that's hyperbolic in saying. So yeah, I think it's cool it's in snow. It also does help set it apart from all the other Batman films. The Batman was a rainy fall, Halloween, early November film, and we're moving forward in time to winter. Does that mean that the third film is going to be spring and Batman reborn in a way that we've never seen before? A lot of people have been thinking there's a possibility of Robin in Batman 2. I think it's more likely we get him in the Batman 3, but those are just my thoughts on the Batman stuff. For Wonder Woman, it is really weird, and this connects to something I actually wrote about on Multiverse of Color, which is Matthew Lillard is joining Man of Tomorrow. Aria Arjona is going to be in Man of Tomorrow. Several outlets are reporting that she's going to be Maxima, but I do find it interesting that James has not said what it is, and some other major outlets have also said it's still unknown. We have two major castings that we don't know the characters for them. There have been so many already that have established who they are going to be. We know that Aaron Pierre is going to be in there, as well as a bunch of other Justice Gang members. Brainiac is, of course, the main villain, and I like that there's the secret to this. My personal gut feeling is that Arjona wouldn't be Maxima, because it just doesn't feel like a character that would have a long run in the DCU, unless it's one of those instances similar to like Peacemaker, where James Gunn goes, yeah, this is like an F-level character who I'm going to make important because we're going to be exploring space within the DCU moving forward. I really don't know. So I'm curious about that. I do think Arya would be an absolutely amazing Wonder Woman. In terms of video game stuff, I don't follow that as closely. For the Marvel stuff, I love Luke Cage being a part of Daredevil Born Again Season 3. And yes, of course, Finn Jones is indeed back as Danny Rand, the Iron Fist. The Defenders universe within Netflix was one of the best parts of the Infinity Saga, even though it wasn't directly connected the way that some people would think it was. It was canon from the start, but when you had Netflix separated from Disney's Marvel movies theatrically, of course, there were semantics there, but it was always canon. It's obviously much more the case in the way it's presented now. And I said this in my Daredevil review, so if you didn't listen to my Daredevil Born Again Season 2 thoughts with Jedi Mike, I highly recommend checking out that episode. But the way in which we can sort of reestablish so many of the Netflix heroes moving forward, I would really hope viewership is up and we do get a Heroes for Hire show, because the supporting characters, not supporting characters, the street level characters of the MCU have always been the most interesting. Mike Coulter and Kristen Ritter's relationships as those two characters, we've seen that things have changed. They have a daughter together. What is their relationship like, spoilers for Born Again, after he returns from working with Mr. Charles? All that stuff's really interesting to me, and the most obvious is, of course, he's going to be running for mayor in New York with Kingpin gone. I'm very excited to see what we do in season 3. Are they going to try to sort of legislate vigilantes as members serving for justice to get Matt out? Allegedly, there's going to be a time jump. Now, we all know they're going to have beards because this was sort of confirmed, but now it's sort of also confirmed even more so. So I'm excited to see what we do for that. It's been very rare that Marvel has recast any major role unless somebody has passed away. So as much as people thought there was potential for them bringing in a different Iron Fist, at the end of the day, I'm not really surprised that we did in fact get Finn Jones back. I'm not that surprised. I'm hoping that the overall investment of what other actors have done to what the action sequence require them to do has changed, and with the special effects budgets being higher now, hopefully we get some more actual Iron Fist. As a fan of Jessica Hennick, I do hope she gets to do more, because the way that that character's story ended in season 2 of Iron Fist could be really interesting as well. Do we have 2 Iron Fists sort of floating around the MCU? I don't know. Maybe she pops up in Shang-Chi 2 instead of a new Iron Fist, which is what a lot of people were suspecting might happen. I didn't say this directly, but of course, I have no idea who Matthew Lillard is going to be playing. It's an unknown role. Who knows? It looks like he's on Earth, which I know the movie's going to be taking place on Earth. That's kind of obvious, but he seems to be in some sort of governmental building, business meeting world. I don't really know. It could be anybody. And the other major thing that happened this week is the Odyssey. I did a trailer reaction for it, so if you're not following Film Realist on any social media stuff, go there and you can see how I reacted to it. It is very interesting to see how Christopher Nolan, such a tangible filmmaker, of course all of his movies have special effects and visual effects, some more so than others, but the way in which he chooses to use them, and while the Odyssey is maybe one of the most grand stories of all time, the way in which he grounds it, where you see so much of it on screen, and it feels like these things truly exist. It's not going for that unreality of mythical in a way where it doesn't feel as if it's supposed to be on Earth, in where other fantasy genres really do feel like they don't connect to what's happening now, or not now, but they don't feel like they're a part of Earth's history in the way that he seems to be exploring this. The part that I'm absolutely blown away by is this cast. It is stacked. We've got a Spider-Man, we've got a Batman, we've got a Punisher, we've got a Catwoman, we've got a Jason Bourne. Matt Damon being the lead in this feels like the evolution of Matt Damon within the Nolan world. We had him as just a cameo, a major supporting character, of course, in Oppenheimer, and now the lead. And I hope, with all of the things that I love so much about Oppenheimer, and then sort of didn't with Tenet, that this is sort of his magnum opus in telling an adaptation. Because, of course, the Dark Knight trilogy was incredibly well received, but the way it ended is mixed, I think is best to say. But overall, I'm very curious about the Odyssey. It looks spectacular, and that's going to be a movie that you absolutely need to see on the biggest screen possible. That's not an ad, that's my feelings towards the footage that I've seen so far from it. That will do it for news. Let me know in the comments if you liked me addressing some of the major movie news of the week. Now let's get to listener mail and question of the week responses.
Can I ask you a question? Just fun?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it. Last week's question of the week was relatively simple. Who is your main in Mortal Kombat? Legacy Odinson writes in, I'm the prodigal Johnny Cage kid. He's been my main since being able to own my own copy on Mortal Kombat 9. Honorable mention to Takeda Takashi. And then we have 2 comments from Scotty Cameron. This is on Daredevil Born Again. Great episode. I love the discussion about Daredevil Born Again Season 2 and how Disney Plus merger of Marvel Television into Marvel Studios has allowed the street-level heroes to work more seamlessly in the MCU. When Marvel Television was just releasing the shows on Netflix, the MCU setting was present, but now it's integral. I want to see more Punisher and Defenders in future seasons. What comic book characters would Kyle like to see in the future? Me, I'd like to see Mr. Fear, Matt's former roommate turned foe. I'm assuming you mean more specifically street level. I know this feels like a cop-out, but I really did love the way that Spider-Man and Daredevil interact in the Chip Zdarsky and Charles Soule run of the comic, in exploring the legality of what Daredevil means in terms of being a vigilante. I like the moral conversations that those 2 characters have. I know we're never going to get Spider-Man in a TV show because of the way that the rights work, but outside of that, I would really like to see, because I think it is, even though his film was not that grounded, Shang-Chi could work really well in terms of his connection to those characters. And then Scotty's comment on Mortal Kombat was, Raiden and Scorpion are up there because in every Mortal Kombat game. However, if Smoke is in the game, he's the top spot for me because he is an easy move to learn and spam, particularly in the more recent games. He's a fun character to play because his smoke teleportation makes him the bane of my enemy's existence. Not to mention, I can reference The Simpsons with the quote, why is there smoke coming out of the oven, Seymour? Sadly, smoke's not in every game. I didn't even know that character, if I'm being totally honest. Then Dylan Pollock writes in, I'm a basic B, so my Mortal Kombat starter is Sub-Zero. Kristen writes in Scorpion. Barton writes in Scorpion and Sub-Zero since the OG Mortal Kombat 1. Sean Campbell says Baraka or Sub-Zero. Isaiah Shaw says Jax. Shane says Scorpion and Katana. Mike Kabig says Sindel. Okay. Steve Oken says Liu Kang. There we go. There's some Liu Kangs. Then we have Devin Owen. Hanzo. Always Hanzo. Play 4D Game says Mortal Kombat X. Jason. Mortal Kombat 11. Noob Cybot. Baraka Jones 89 says always have been a fan of Baraka. Not surprising. Victoria says Scorpion. Manip says Kung Lao. Death Moki says Smoke. And then Minty. Who does Minty say? Minty says Goro, bro. So there's a lot of variety in there, which I really appreciate. There's so many different characters. I would say this is basic just because of his iconography. I always went with Liu Kang or Scorpion. They, to me, are the most iconic characters in the films. Not in the films, in the games. One has been iconic in the films and the other's sort of becoming a supporting character, but that's neither here nor there. Thank you to everybody who submitted their answers for the question of the week. Now on to this week's question of the week. We're almost halfway through May, and there's been so many excellent television shows in the first third of 2026. So that's my question of the week. What has been your favorite show in 2026 so far? To let me know, you can comment below on YouTube and Spotify. You can also email the podcast, filmreelistspod@gmail.com, or you can @filmreelist on any of the social medias. Just make sure to include the hashtag QOTW. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It helps the podcast get seen on more people's featured page, which would be absolutely amazing. If you are listening on your preferred podcast platform and haven't given 5 stars, please do so. That would also be incredible. Next week's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a wrap-up of shows I haven't had a chance to talk about yet. So that's a full spoiler discussion of Invincible Season 4, as well as the back half of Monarch Legacy of Monsters. If anything else that you can think of I haven't discussed yet, please make sure to let me know in the comments for this episode. I like doing those because not every season of TV that I watch has the opportunity to be featured in an episode depending on the release schedule throughout the year. So that's what that episode's going to be. Make sure you follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss next week's episode. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time.